Okay, get this. A black man, a professional musician, decides he's going to seek out and become friends with leaders of the Ku Klux Klan. I know, it sounds completely impossible, right? Dangerous, maybe even a little crazy. But it's the true story of a man named Daryl Davis who walked straight into the heart of American hatred. And he wasn't armed with a weapon. No, he was armed with a question. A question that would end up changing hundreds of lives, starting with his own. And this is it. This is the question that haunted Daryl Davis since he was a kid, the thing that launched him on this unbelievable journey. See, he wasn't looking for a fight. He was just looking for an answer. Now, to really get what drove Daryl, you've got to understand where he came from. And his childhood, it was anything but typical. His dad was a U.S. diplomat, so he grew up overseas, living in this incredibly diverse, multi-ethnic world. His friends were from all different races, and the idea of prejudice, well, it was a completely foreign concept to him. He didn't even know what it was. But then, when his family moved back to the United States in 1968, that beautiful bubble of acceptance he lived in, it didn't just pop, it exploded. He's 10 years old, just marching in a Cub Scout parade, and he's suddenly being pelted with rocks and bottles by white spectators. Then, after Dr. King was killed, his white friends were suddenly told you can't play with him anymore. As a teenager, it got even worse. Members of the American Nazi Party actually cornered him at his own school, telling him he'd either be shipped back to Africa or just eliminated. America gave him a very shocking, very brutal education in hate. So all of this hate, right, coming from people who knew absolutely nothing about him, it just burned that one question deeper and deeper into his mind. He read every book he could on the KKK. But you know what? Reading just wasn't enough. He realized that if he really, truly wanted to understand this kind of hatred, he had to go straight to the source. He had to look it right in the eye. So he made a decision that, let's be honest, most people would find completely unthinkable. He decided he was going to actively seek out and interview members of the Ku Klux Klan. And he didn't start at the bottom, oh no. He aimed right for the top. His first target was a man named Roger Kelly. Daryl saw him on a TV news report, and the guy was dressed in a suit, but the hateful things coming out of his mouth, Daryl knew right then, that's the guy. That's the one I need to meet. And this wasn't just some random member. This was the Grand Dragon, the leader of the KKK for the entire state of Maryland. And the danger here? It was not theoretical. A former Klansman gave him this absolutely chilling warning. This wasn't a game. This was a potentially deadly meeting with a true believer. But for Daryl, that need for an answer, that question, it was just way bigger than his fear. He was really smart about how he did it. He had his secretary, Mary, make the call. She framed it as an interview for a book he was writing about the Klan. But she very carefully and very intentionally left out one critical piece of information, the author's race. They set up the meeting in a motel room, neutral territory, and got ready for what was sure to be an incredibly tense and maybe even violent first meeting. When the day of the meeting finally came, Daryl didn't go in there to preach or to protest. He went in simply to listen and to talk. And his approach, it was completely disarming because it was the absolute last thing they ever expected. I mean, you couldn't have two more different ways of thinking in one room. Kelly came in with his rigid ideology, quoting Bible verses he claimed preached racial separation. Daryl, on the other hand, just came in with pure curiosity. He would listen patiently, really listen, and then he'd pull out his own copy of the Bible and ask Kelly to show him exactly where it said that. He was gently challenging the very foundation of his beliefs. You can just imagine the atmosphere in that motel room. Kelly wasn't alone. He brought his bodyguard, a guy they called the Nighthawk, who sat there the entire time with his hand literally resting on his gun. Every word, every single movement was just charged with suspicion and the unspoken threat of violence. And then something completely unexpected happened. A loud crash suddenly echoed through the room. Everybody jumped, thinking it was a trap. But it was just some ice cubes shifting around in a soda bucket. And in that one moment, the sheer absurdity of the situation hit all of them. Here's a black man and two Klansmen terrified of a bucket of ice, and they all just burst out laughing. And in that one shared, simple moment of humanity, the tension just shattered. It wasn't a confrontation anymore. It had just become a conversation. That first meeting, well, that was just the beginning. And the results of Daryl Davis's patient, persistent conversations are, and I'm not exaggerating here, nothing short of astonishing. He didn't just get an answer to his question. he actually started changing the people he was questioning. Over the years, through friendship and just talking, more than 200 men have done the unthinkable. They have voluntarily left the Ku Klux Klan directly because of their relationship with Daryl Davis. Let that sink in for a second. 200 men. And the proof is real, it's tangible. As these men walked away from a life of hate, they would do this incredibly symbolic thing. They would give their robes and hoods, the very icons of their hatred, to Daryl. The man they were supposed to hate became the keeper of their surrendered past. So what about Roger Kelly, the Grand Dragon? Well, that tense motel meeting blossomed into a real, genuine friendship. They met again and again, talking for hours, sometimes at Kelly's own home. They debated, they argued, sure, but they also listened and they shared. And that friendship, it eventually led Roger Kelly to quit the Klan entirely. But his transformation wasn't even done yet. And this friendship led to what might be the most powerful moment in this entire story. Years after that first meeting, when Roger Kelly had a daughter, he asked Daryl Davis, the black man he once saw as his sworn enemy, to be her godfather. A Klansman's daughter with a black godfather. I mean, if that's not the power of dialogue, I don't know what is. So, what's the ultimate lesson here? What did Daryl Davis discover in his decades-long journey straight into the heart of hate? Well, it's something that feels profoundly relevant for the world we're all living in today. He basically distilled it all down to this simple but incredibly powerful formula. It all starts with ignorance, just not knowing the other. That ignorance creates fear. And if you don't keep that fear in check, it curdles into hatred. And if you don't stop the hatred, it will inevitably lead to destruction. It's a predictable and really tragic progression. But if that's the disease, what's the cure? Well, the antidote, as Daryl discovered, is deceptively simple. It's conversation. Because think about it, as long as two enemies are talking, they're not fighting. Talking keeps that disease of hatred in check. It replaces ignorance with actual information. It replaces fear with familiarity. And so the story of Daryl Davis really leaves us with one last question. When you strip away all the ignorance that breeds fear, when you replace it with just having a conversation, what's really left to hate?